Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Manny Lagos. Manny, it's been a couple days. The rough week is over. We're moving on now. How are you feeling, sir?
I'm feeling good. I think we're moving on because we're finally having a guest on who is basically, it's his show. And I think that is where we need.
It's about time I get invited back to what was theoretically my show.
Correct. Yeah, it's been a while. So, yeah. I know. Back at it. We, like I said, it's crazy. We've had such a great year. You have 2 losses in a row, not even in the league, by the way. And you get a little down. But we got a big game this weekend and a lot to play for in this final month.
Yeah. And bringing in our guest, Jon Marthaler of the Star Tribune, we had to give him some time off after he went 2 for 10 on the State Fair trivia, cool him down a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm still angry. I'm not any cooler. I'm still angry about the trivia.
And the only ones he got right was from a non-talking
from a nonverbal mascot was the only help I could get.
John, how are you? How are you feeling? How's your sports mood feeling?
Well, I feel like nothing bad has particularly happened in sports for a couple of days, so everything's fine. It's funny being a Minnesota sports fan because your life is just so bipolar. There's one day where everything goes wrong, and then the next day the Vikings win and everything's fine. Then the Lynx lose the next day, and it's all terrible again. So
the Lynx will be fine. Let's be honest here. Lynx are too good. They will not. They're going.
I was utterly convinced they would win that game, even up until sort of after they lost it. Like, well, something will happen. They'll come back. Yeah. I know that the clock says 0 in overtime, but they'll come back, right? That's the Lynx are the anti-Minnesota sports team. Everything I believe about Minnesota sports does not apply to the Minnesota Lynx.
Correct. Yeah.
I feel like they're the one for sure bet you have in this market at times.
Absolutely.
In sports.
And everything that is true about every other Minnesota team about, this will go wrong, that'll go wrong. None of that works for the Lynx. They get one of their important players gets hurt. And my reaction was not, here we go again. It's everything will be fine. It'll be fine. Nothing will ever go wrong. They'll come back.
I cannot argue with that sentiment, John. I feel the same way. They are going to come back and win. So.
This is why Cheryl Reeves should coach every team in Minnesota. And I'm not just talking about the basketball teams. Every team.
This is surprisingly not a Minnesota Lynx podcast. That's elsewhere on podcast networks. This is a Minnesota United podcast. So we'll jump into the MLS action. Plenty to discuss. And we'll get to the Minnesota United of all in a little bit as the usual rundown goes. We're back to the usual rundown. So, Manny, let's talk about what happened last night in MLS, some midweek action as teams try to catch up to where everybody else is in the league in their games in hand. Miami surging clearly at the right time, a big 4-0 win over a New York City FC team that is in pretty good position themselves. They've been playing well. They got a win at the weekend that ended Charlotte's 9-match winning streak. So this is a big win for Miami team that has a ton of games in hand, as we said last week with Kevin Egan. And this is a good time to start piling up the wins as they look to they're now just 5 points out of the Supporter Shield race.
Yeah, I think, first of all, get ready, Jonathan, because you're about to have to do some work finally. You usually don't have work, but I think we got to do some deep cuts into the standings and where we are and where Miami is. I think Miami passed us in points. Messi had a couple goals last night, one with the left, one with the right foot. Great finishes.
They're ahead of Minnesota by 1 point.
Okay, Suarez had the PK. It was a good game for Miami. There seems like they might actually make a run for closing out the schedule with a lot of wins, which would push them up the table in front of us. The reason why I want you to kind of look at it, Jonathan, is I still think we have the potential for a top 4 finish. Obviously, the West is still in play, particularly with Vancouver tying last night. But it's a big deal because we got this big game coming in Colorado. But Miami passes in points. In some ways, Miami being in the top 4 is not the worst thing for us because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that if Miami is in the top 4 and we are in the top 5, we would still qualify for CONCACAF Champions League?
I'm going to have to ask Manny. Manny's the only one who understands this.
Jonathan,
I have tried to figure that out. Tried to figure out CONCACAF Cup qualifying as much as I can, and tried to understand the intricacies. I can't even say that word right now. I've tried to understand.
It's so intricate, you can't even say it.
Yeah, it's early in the morning for me. I've tried to understand it, and I can't figure out when a team qualifies, when the spot moves down to the next team, how many spots get or how many tournaments
every channel is your more, so I think it's 4 league spots. Okay.
Right.
I think the top 4 finishes is you get it. I think it's 3 leagues cup. So it's the champion, it's the second place, third place champion, which is why the Galaxy. It's the US Open champion. Where it gets complicated is when you start
when you move it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So my brain is telling me that if Miami is in the top 4, then it would be top 5 of the league because they got second in the Leagues Cup.
So what you're telling me is I have to cheer for Miami? Because I don't think I like that.
I think you just have to keep an eye on the standings here. Like,
okay, I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we win 3 games. We're in a great space for either of these things, but we have to win 3 straight games.
Yeah, for sure. It's confusing. The CONCACAF Champions Cup qualifying. We'll figure it out as the season goes along. I'm sure there'll be explainers.
They looked good last night. You're right. Yes. Miami looked for a midweek game. Messi 2 goals, Suarez a goal. I do not like the baseball field. I cannot wait for them to actually get a stadium in New York. It doesn't present well, but Messi seems to be getting fitter and sharper, either for the playoffs or this international break. So who knows?
It's an interesting time for them. Elsewhere, as you mentioned, Manny, Vancouver won, Portland won. That helps out the Loons, keeps Vancouver within reaching distance, keeps the West in play, John, after a difficult week for Minnesota United. But an interesting result for Vancouver. Had been rolling lately. Obviously, they made some rotations to their squad. They were a bit thin as well, but still an important result for Minnesota that Vancouver couldn't find a way to get past Portland. Also means that the Loons can't finish any lower than 6th place.
I saw that in the notes that you said, well, now the Loons can't finish any lower than 6th. Boy, that is about the faintest possible good thing you can say right now. Oh, well, they're not going to be in the play-in game. After this season, we're going to exult that they're not in the play-in game. That's small. I will say that Vancouver and Austin both seem like they're never going to lose another game. So that could be a potential problem for other teams come playoff time. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but neither of them can find a way to lose anymore.
I think we got to put LAFC in that category too. It feels like they're never going to lose a game, and they're always going to have a hat trick scored in every single game from here on out with how well Son has fit into that lineup, man. It has been an impressive fit, a quick fit for them. Things have started clicking for LAFC as they get their latest boost from Tottenham to go to the MLS or to try and battle for the MLS Cup title.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to block out LAFC for a second because that's how good they are. I just want to quickly go back to people about the Vancouver-Portland game. Go watch the first goal, the left-sided center back for Portland. Great strike from distance. Also, Portland has sneakily had some great road results against us, against San Diego, against Vancouver. So, again, a potential first-round playoff opponent for us in terms of they're really starting to play good defense. So I think they have a good run of form now going into their potential playoff run. I do think that the result again last night, like I said, with the Seattle one, it's very knock on wood hard for us to not be in the top 4 now. I think we're 9 points up on Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
4 games to play. We have 3. So essentially, 57, but it would take a lot for us to not be a top 4 finish. So I know our notes said the top 6 there, blah, 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 but these results keep kind of going our way with these ties in the West. Back to LAFC, I thought they looked great. I mean, when you beat a team in the West on aggregate 2 games in a row by 8-2, Son and Bouanga, arguably the 2 most dangerous offensive players right now in the league outside of Messi. It's an impressive run they have right now.
Yeah, going back to Seattle, you said the standings, and we'll reference those quite a bit over the next couple of weeks. Their final 4 games: Vancouver, Portland, Real Salt Lake, and New York City FC at NYCFC on the final day of the season. So that is a very, very difficult run into the final, or to close out the season. They would have to win all 4 of those, and that's going to be a difficult ask for them, even though they have been pretty dang good this season. But it feels like top 4 is almost for sure for this team, for the Loons. It feels that way, but you don't ever want to take anything for granted. As we started off the show saying about Minnesota sports, John, this is going to be, when you look at some of the other results from the weekend, Austin beating Seattle 2-1 in the Western Conference anyways, this is going to be a heck of a run-in for the Western Conference. And we can talk about the Eastern Conference in a little bit, but the Western Conference, obviously, our focus is going to be tight down the final 4 weeks of the season.
There certainly are a lot of teams that you look and go, oh, this is just like LAFC. They had 15 games in hand, and now they win every game with a hat trick. Miami, it was like 3 weeks ago, and I recognize that even at the time they had 5 or 6 games in hand or something stupid. But I remember looking in, Miami was down in 8th place in the standings. Now, points per game, I think they were 2nd in the standings or something like that. But on points, they were in 8th, and it's hard not to be excited. Like, oh man, this is going to be awesome if Inter Miami finishes 8th, and now they're going to win the Supporters Shield or whatever. So it's frustrating when all of the good teams remain good. You want them to not succeed, and then they do, and it's just disappointing as a fan.
It's hard to argue with that. Yeah, I mean it's frustrating watching these teams who, for me anyways, as a fan looking at it, who struggled at points in this season now continue to find ways to get in form like LAFC does every single season at the end of the year. My question about Miami, Manny, is that with the games in hand, with their roster build, read older side of the lineups, older side of the league, is that going to hurt them come playoff time with how many games they've had to play over the last month and a half of the season, continually playing every 3 days, it feels like? Is that going to hurt them when the playoffs finally start and it's going to be a brawl throughout 90 minutes? Are they going to have more tired legs than their opponents?
I mean, potentially. Again, I think that's the challenge of MLS still is a lot of these guys that come from leagues that you kind of can limp to the finish line. In this country, in every sport that we do, you have to build the group that's strongest by the end of the year to make a playoff run. And so that's what happened last year at the end of the day. At the end of the day, that Miami went into a playoff thinking that it was going to be how the regular season was. And I think they got caught a little off guard about the intensity level of the playoffs is just up to notch. So ultimately, that's going to be their goal, probably, is to build their group to be ready for the playoffs this year and learn from last year. I've been pretty impressed with their last couple of games in terms of these midweek games. They've looked pretty sharp for their kind of older group out there, but we'll see. They still have a lot of time left. And by the way, John, we still have Toronto, Galaxy, Atlanta. We've got some teams that spend and you expect, and they've really struggled this year. So it's not all the haves and have-nots of this league. I do love the Minnesotas, the Vancouvers, the Phillies of the world are still kind of surprising people.
Well, you better believe John has LA Galaxy down at the bottom of the league marked on his calendar and loves watching that disaster fire every week.
It's been here's the thing though. It's been funny talking to Minnesota people over the last week as sort of they got knocked out of the US Open Cup, and then the Supporters Shield, sort of the chances for that sort of went away when they lost to Chicago. And a lot of them are pointing to, well, we still want to make the top 4. We still want to get a Champions League spot. This is something that's never happened for the club. Guess who's already in the Champions Cup next year? That's right, the LA Galaxy. How worthwhile can it be if the LA Galaxy are in this tournament?
John already slandering Champions Cup.
I'm not slandering it. I'm just saying this thing that Minnesota, they're just striving for it. The Galaxy are having one of the worst seasons in MLS history, that they won MLS Cup and then they were the worst team in the league next season. But guess what, man? They're already in the Champions Cup. Well, there's all these other.
It's like, it's hard. It's his show. He's honest. He's real. He's exposing our Minnesota deep wounds. Like, there's
all these teams. They can't help but qualify for the champion. Colorado's in the Champions Cup every year, despite finishing 8th in the league every year. And somehow, I guess Colorado's playing in this. It turned February. All of a sudden, there's a Honduran team playing in Denver. And what is going on? I don't know. How did
either Colorado Real
What
Salt
happened?
Lake
Yeah, Real Salt Lake is in this tournament every year. It's just, it's unreal. I don't understand it.
Well, that goes back to figuring out how to qualify for this tournament.
And it goes back to, we've had a great year. And by the way, I'm so excited for this weekend because we have responded in league play after a tough game with a good fight and a good battle and usually a good result. So it's a big week for the club and the group, and we've had some adversity, but like I said, the 3 to play, it is officially now the coaches speak, the cliche talk, one game at a time. If we do that, we could get 9 points. I really believe that.
and they're a week apart every one of these games, so that gives a plus the international break between the second to last and the last game. So one final note on the Western Conference coming up. I do want to ask you this quick, Manny. What's going on with Columbus? Just one win in their last 6 matches, down to 8th place in the Eastern Conference. They're in the play-in game for a team that I think many coming into the year expected them to be battling for the Supporter Shield or the top of the Eastern Conference, and now they're fighting and scrapping for a place not in the play-in games.
I mean, I go back to John's emotional energy about our U.S. Open Cup loss, because this league has 30 pro soccer clubs that are tough and strong and always growing and building, and it's a year-to-year league that every year you could maybe win, and every year you could make a run for any type of trophy. So the reality is, I think when you get complacent, whether it's because your club has just won and so now the media or fans annoy you, or you lose a couple key players, and it sometimes actually helps. But sometimes the reality is, whoa, Cucho was really good, like really, really good. And that helped build everything around it. And so I think it's a little bit of everything. And obviously Nancy's still a coach, but the reality is, I think they're going through that phase that this is a tough league. And like, if you don't play with that edge and continue to push yourself to grow, you can get caught. Now, there's no doubt, like a lot of teams on both conferences, I still think they can believe they can get hot and build a group that can go and make a run in the playoffs. Columbus is probably in that mode right now where they're like have to regroup and figure out how to A, get in, and then B, how can they make a group that can make a run.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting watching what happens in the West or in the Eastern Conference. Columbus being down there, just 5 points above Chicago with a couple games to play there, is a very interesting turnabout. John?
The hardest part is I'm going to have to find somebody else to vote for Coach of the Year this year. That was just an automatic vote. Well, it's Wilfred Nancy. Of course, it's Wilfred.
You still do it.
You see this Columbus team that he's got in first place? Now I don't know who it'll be. Maybe it'll be Greg Berhalter, just because if the Fire make the playoffs, that's like any other team winning 2 trophies.
So, John, at this point, who is your Coach of the Year?
It's got to be between Carnell, Varis, and Sorensen, right?
Well, I think Varis or Sorensen would be the front runners. I don't know if I can vote for Carnell after Ernst Tanner was taking a victory lap 12 minutes into the season. It just seems like rewarding that kind of behavior is just not okay. I as much as I joke, if Berhalter gets Chicago to the playoffs, that feels like that might be, if there was like a rank your top 3 kind of thing. I feel like that would be the kind of thing where maybe you'd have to put Berhalter second or third just to give him some votes and give him some props for getting the Fire back to the playoffs after 45 years or whatever it's been.
Manny, who's your front runner?
I think those 3 are right on, spot on. I don't think there's much debate. Philly, Vancouver, and San Diego have all kind of done a really good job for sure. So,
yeah.
I think our guy there is in the conversation. There's no doubt about it. Which is pretty cool because, again, I think Minnesota has surprised a lot of people about the season we've had.
Mm-hmm, for sure. One final on the Western Conference, a draw for San Diego on the road, 1-1 draw against Atlanta keeps the West within reach despite the difficult performance that we'll move on to now. Manny, 3-0 loss at the weekend to Chicago. Is a difficult game coming off of a very heartbreaking loss in the midweek in the U.S. Open Cup semifinals. Obviously, a heavily rotated squad. Don't ever want to make excuses, but it's a difficult night on Saturday. Overall, what went wrong for you on Saturday?
I think it's going to be the set pieces at the end of the day. I actually thought we had a first 10 or 15 minutes had a really good start to the game. I thought we kind of had some energy. We got forward. We were winning the ball in good spots. Chicago's got a quality roster right now. I think they've kind of shored up their defense in this transfer window, and their front 4 is close to as good as any team in the league. I don't want to say that it's as good as any team in the league, but it is a really dangerous front 4 that can create a lot of problems. And they, as the first half went on, they kind of, which they should have. I mean, we had 4 MLS starters ever for the first time. I didn't say that completely the way I wanted to. 4 starters starting their first ever MLS game. It was almost like either a first preseason game or your first game of the year, where everybody's kind of get to know everybody, and we didn't even play a lot of preseason together. So there was challenges there, and the reality is I thought we handled them well up until a couple sloppy fouls in tough areas, and then the goals themselves happen, and now you're in a big hole. So I think it was a night that Chicago showed up, played really, really well, played well with the lead. It took us a while to get back into it. But I'll tell you, at that second half, if it had gone 2-1, I know we can't always lament too much, but it would have been fun to see how that game turned out if we would have figured out a way to score when it was 2-0 to see if we could have gone 2-1.
John, your overall thoughts when looking back at the game on Saturday, where did things go wrong for Minnesota?
Well, it felt to me a lot like the Houston game from earlier this season, where Minnesota went on the road, and it sort of seemed like the same. It was the same plan of, all right, we're going to play a heavily rotated team, and Minnesota would obviously love to get some goals. This is, their planning. It seemed like their plan was, we hope that we could take a lead, but ultimately what we want to do is keep it tight, get to 45, get to 60 minutes, and it's 0-0, and then we can put in some players and then try to make a difference in the second half. Except against Houston, they gave up a goal in the last minute of the first half. Against Chicago, they gave up 2 set-piece goals in the first half, and then Minnesota is a squad that just is not really built to come from behind, if that makes sense. It's not necessarily a team that plays a lot from behind with the ability to score 3 goals in 20 minutes or something like that. So once they were down 2-0, it felt a little bit hopeless. Obviously, like Manny said, they even had the ball in the net. Jen was offside, but
barely.
Yeah, it was almost 2-1, and then Chicago has sort of a history this season of collapsing when they're trying to hold a lead like that. But it obviously went the other way. It was just about right from the disallowed goal that Chicago went down the other end and scored, and then Dane St. Clair even had to save a penalty to keep it from being 4-0. It was one of those games that at about the 60-minute mark, I'm up in the press box sort of researching, all right, when was the last time Minnesota lost by 3 at home, by 4 at home, by 5 at home? This seems like it's going to be more likely than when is the last time Minnesota came back from 2 goals down, 3 goals down, whatever it looks like. So it felt like a real hangover from the Wednesday night gut punch.
I really like that, the comparison to Houston, John. I think the context here, at least for some audience that maybe doesn't follow us or the team as closely, but we had the game in San Diego, so flying out there for a really tough 90-minute, a lot of defensive physicality for us to go through in that game. Then you have the 120-minute game on Wednesday, and so this now becomes a really tough kind of moment for the group and the coaching staff in terms of, like, we have some guys who are what we call the red zone for potential injury in terms of their minutes. Now, probably 45-ish is safe for a lot of those guys that played all the minutes in San Diego and all the minutes against Austin. And there's one of 2 ways to do that. You kind of do it, what we just talked about there, where we maybe like rest them in the beginning and try to see if we can get them in the second half. And that's kind of the cycle of a normal training week. And hopefully we don't have injuries and we still get the result. Or you go the opposite way. You say, you know what, you're going to play the first 45. We're going to set the tone and go from there. It's hard. It's a tough call. At the end of the day, like the Houston game, we didn't quite get to half. I do think it would have been a different game if we did, but we didn't. And this year, we're still learning how to come back when we get down. And I still thought there was a moment in that second half where it goes 2-1. We would have done well. But let's give some credit to Chicago. They came in, they moved the ball, they created some chances, and it was one of the better games Chicago, I think, has played against us in a long time.
John, I see you shaking your head there.
I just, again, to go back to the Minnesota sports fan thing, I don't like the phrase, let's give some credit to Chicago. It's just, it doesn't feel right to say out loud. Yeah. And I know, Minnesota and Chicago Fire are not rivals. It's the geographically closest team, but not rivals. They're in different conferences. So it's not quite the same, but it just feels icky to say. I don't like it. By the way,
my gut says we're going to be rivals someday. So.
When every year, I bet this is the year that MLS reorganizes their conferences a little bit, and it never happens, and they show no signs of wanting to, but maybe next year.
Within the next couple of years.
When they when they get those extra teams in Las Vegas and Phoenix or wherever, and Minnesota gets moved to the Eastern Conference, and all these road games start at 6 instead of 9:30, it'll be great. Think of how well everyone will sleep in Minnesota.
John, it's just like you're such a breath of fresh air when you're.
I'm just going to keep letting him go.
Oh, Minnesota. So Minnesota.
Why is John ranting about start times? Well, that's just who he is.
Because there's deadlines for beat writers, and they don't like going past 9:30.
Well, not anymore. There's not.
That's fair. That's a topic for a different kind of podcast.
That's right, though. Start time should be 7 o'clock, not 7:30.
I agree.
Start time should be 7 o'clock, not 7:30.
I am all in on that.
Do people from MLS listen to this podcast? Because if so, I have several other rants I'd like to go on.
I'm sure they've heard one or two over the past couple months or years.
Why is this guy talking about the Galaxy again? I thought this was a Loons podcast.
To your point, John, this team doesn't play from behind often, so it's a bit difficult for them. It kind of changes up how they've played this season when they do go behind. They don't get behind very often, so that changes things up for them. Manny, this one for me, based off the way the game was played and what we saw on Saturday, it's a hard one to square away last week because, as you said, started off great. The week did in San Diego with a really good performance, a really good win, a key win for the season. And then you followed up with the heartbreaking loss on Wednesday and then a heavily rotated squad against Chicago. And you get outplayed at home in a 3-0 loss, a really difficult loss to watch for sure. I just have such a hard time squaring away last week because of the way it started and what that game meant for the rest of the season. I'm trying to figure out how to, I guess, kind of make it all make sense from what we've seen and how to feel going forward with this team. How do you kind of, I guess, gather your emotions, gather your thoughts on what you saw over the entirety of last week?
Oh, I think we have to remind ourselves, we are in the playoffs already. We have the highest point total we've ever had in the MLS era as a club. We are still in contention for the West. We're still contention, for top 2, top 3. We're still contention top 4 overall in the entire league. Like my brain is right away to thinking about how well of a season we had. And I go back to the energy and output of both the players and the fans on Wednesday was just unbelievable. Think about the fans showed up and knew what was on the line and were devastated. The club, we did not lay an egg that night. We dealt with a lot of adversity, pushed through injuries, pushed through refereeing, pushed through, like you said, traveling to San Diego, all of that, and 120 minutes almost came out with a win and didn't. And that's sports. And then we follow it up with a couple of days later, mentally, physically exhausted. Yeah, we hope it had gone well, but it didn't. Now we have every opportunity to regroup and say, take stock. Where are we? Yes, we've got some injuries. Yes, Tani has gone. By the way, scored a goal this week. Amazing against Sevilla for Villarreal. And we've got to regroup. And what better place than Colorado? One of the teams that we really, really have physical battles against. And in Colorado where, yes, it's tough to play. Yes, there's altitude. But we can't afford to feel sorry for ourselves, Jonathan, at this point. Mm-hmm. We can't afford to even feel the world's against it. It's not. We're having a great year. We are having one of a historic year. And I think we just need to get back to that mentality.
For sure. It's been, thankfully, as opposed to last week where we were doing the show less than 12 hours after the defeat, we've had some time to kind of process our thoughts and emotions after the Chicago loss. John, you said you didn't want to give credit to Chicago, so I'm going to make you do it. I'm going to make you talk about their game and what they did and how they really outplayed, I guess, Minnesota on the
show. He just said maybe Burrell should be coach of the year. So he somehow
that's right.
You can't have it both ways.
I contain multitudes.
So what was it for them? Obviously, the set pieces we talked about those in the first half. Essentially, the same set pieces from pretty much the same spot in the field, the same motions. It felt like, except for the second one, Dane St. Clair wasn't able to get his hand on the ball this time or that time. But it felt like those two goals were exact mirrors of each other. What did Chicago do that you saw on the field that really kind of exploited Minnesota?
I gotta say, if you're any other team in MLS, never mind Chicago, and you come to Minnesota and score 2 set piece goals in the first half, that must just be about the most satisfying feeling as a coach and a group of players ever. It's like, you remember old, I'm going to use a baseball comparison here. You remember old Yankee Stadium and then had that, the right field stands that were somehow 212 feet from the plate, and the Yankees won 15 World Series by having a bunch of lefties who just swat fly balls into the right field stands. It's like if you go to Yankee Stadium in a playoff game and hit 6 home runs as a visiting team that land 315 feet into the stands just out of they'd be fly ball outs in any other park except in Yankee Stadium, their home runs. Just the satisfaction of beating a team on the road the exact way that they beat everybody must be absolutely overwhelming. Like I have to imagine that after that game, Greg Berhalter was just, sits down in the locker room and just sort of pats himself on the back like, good job, me. Good job, team. This was awesome. This is exactly what you want against Minnesota.
Those 2 goals in the first half were just the 9th and 10th first half goals the Loons have allowed in MLS regular season play this year. So obviously the set piece play we talk about with this team a lot, but it's that first half defending numbers that are just insane to me.
Just where, I think this talk speaks to kind of like a new starting group. I thought we were just a little deeper than we usually are on each of them. And I think that just creates a situation where Dane's not quite sure what's his space, what their space is. And it just felt like maybe without Boxall out there, we weren't set up exactly the line where we wanted it to be. And,
that's something Will Trapp actually mentioned after the game.
Oh, did he?
We asked him what went wrong about the set pieces, and he said, well, they did a good job of getting our line to drop faster. They did the one guy runs up, the other guy runs up, and so the line dropped quicker. It obviously starts with a very high line, and then Minnesota sort of dropped back, and the line ended up getting deeper. So you and Will Trapp agree, Manny. That's all right.
Well, you're bringing up too, though, that they did a good job then of they had a left foot and right footed guy. That's why sometimes when people see why are they having both guys at the ball, because they don't want the line to know who's going to take it in swinging or out swinging kick, etc. So but that's another example of maybe just a little bit different lineup. Sometimes those things can happen. I would say too, Dane's parry was good, but it also just could have been, a little bit harder. So Waterman just didn't have such an easier way to put it back in. But for a center back to kind of hit that quality of a finish,
from that angle too, there's no angle there. Essentially, he's right on the line.
By the way, I just threw that kind of criticism at Dane, which really wasn't, because he parried the ball to the side, which he's supposed to do. Second half, his PK save was exciting. And we're getting into PK time of the year. So that got me excited. I loved how the crowd was pumped into that saving for Dane. A 3-0 game, and they went nuts. I love that. It was kind of a cool little moment. A glass half full moment.
And it feels like that could be kind of important going forward, because John, I think you and I talked about it on this podcast after the Gold Cup, I think, where Dane kind of missed some penalties, didn't really save any in that tournament, had the chances in the Leagues Cup, didn't do as well there, but getting the save on Saturday night in a 3-0 loss, you're down, you're trying to make it, or you're trying to prevent it from being 4-0, but getting that save under his belt when we're, as Manny said, going into the playoffs where penalty kicks might be a thing. We might get to that point especially in the first round, like we saw last year. It felt like that might be an important step and a measurement for Dane going into the playoffs.
And you look at the stats overall, he's the best goalkeeper against penalties in MLS history, and you just want him to keep that record going. So good for him. That was the smallest of silver linings from losing 3-0 to Chicago, but still a silver lining nonetheless. And like you say, Dane's obviously he's a goalkeeper that has a lot of sort of emotions that go into his performance, and having a save like that, if it can get his confidence going, I think that'll help Minnesota too.
For sure.
Speaking of silver linings, I do want to kind of point out, I really enjoyed Momo's kind of activeness and willing to run in the channel, and really, he at times, like I said, there was moments in the game where he really extended the defense in a way that is similar to Kelvin, similar to Tani. So again, young and getting into it, but I thought he had a really good shift. I thought Fitz's first 15 to 20 minutes when he kind of found pockets where we actually, I thought, kind of dominated the first quarter of that game was really fun to see somebody that wants to get a little bit higher up, but underneath the forwards and see if we can get some creative moments and spaces that way. Again, I think the reality is some of these new guys who came and went to San Diego, then the Austin, and now are just still in their first couple weeks of literally preseason in terms of fitness. It probably was a tough night for him to kind of find himself back in a game, especially if we got down 2-0. But there was some nice moments there for some of the new guys, I thought, who were trying to help us within an undermanned lineup get a result.
And that was yeah, go ahead.
I would like to say he fits playing in a team where his two main attacking options aren't a guy making his first MLS start at the age of 21 and a guy making his first MLS start at the age of 18. You know what I mean?
A lot. It was a lot.
Yeah.
This guy, he obviously has got a creator's game, and I feel like we need to see him with maybe some different players up there to sort of pass judgment on what maybe he can be down the stretch here.
Yeah, but I still think there's a fitness thing. Even Fiantes, who I think on paper looks probably fitter, but we forget that these guys came so late in the transfer window, and there really is 3 to 4 weeks to really get game fit, I believe, in MLS during the season. Off season, I think it's 4 to 6. So we're still asking a lot of these guys to come in and contribute, and it's going to be hard week in and week out if we're going to play 3 games in a week like we just did.
Do game day like a VIP with Minnesota United premium tickets. From suites to private boxes to the outdoor roof deck experience, Allianz Field offers a range of luxury seating options that'll make you feel like a pro. Learn more about our spaces at allianzfield.com. Well, the question going forward, before we get back to you, John, is who do we see up top now that the news, since we last podcasted, has come out and we've all had time to digest it? Kelvin Yeboah out for the rest of the regular season, at least. Hopefully comes back for the playoffs. He'll be out. And obviously we mentioned Daniel O'Shea. He was sold to Villarreal. So your top 2 forward options gone for the rest of the season. How do we see that adjustment going forward, John? Is this Momo's time, or is this Bongi getting pushed up to the attack like we saw at the end of the Austin game? It's an interesting, conundrum and question for Eric Ramsey to figure out over the last 3 weeks of the season.
I think the easy choice is obviously to put Jang up there because he's center
his
forward.
Natural position.
I do sort of like his game in the sense that I always really like a striker whose tendency is to run behind and sort of warp the defense, rather than maybe always coming short. Obviously, that's a tactical thing, and so it's not just about the strengths of the player. But I did like that about Jang's game on Saturday, that he really was committed to pulling center backs out of position just with movement rather than sort of combination. I don't know why I prefer that. I just do. Obviously, that's the easy choice. I think in some ways, the safer choice is, it feels like Bongi, just because has so much MLS experience as compared to Jang or Randall or whoever else you might put up at number 9. And he certainly seems like a more dynamic choice than maybe taking Robin Lod and putting him up front yet again. And somebody on social media was telling me, well, everybody wants to say that Robin Lod is playing a false 9 and he's not really playing a false 9. And that's true. But when he plays up there, it just sort of, it ends up looking like a false 9 because he's not going to do sort of either one of those things. He's not going to run in behind. It's not his game. And so there's a few choices. I feel like the safe one is Jang, and well, did I say the safe one? I'm not sure which one's the safe one anymore, but
I was about to say, you were like,
I think I said both of them were the safe one. I'm getting confused by myself. The easy one is Jang. Maybe the safer one is Bongi, just because he has more MLS experience.
Yeah. I think great insight, John. I think a couple of things. First of all, I just want to give another shout out, silver lining, Darius, first start MLS. How cool, young kid from Minnesota. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I got chills when the crowd cheered for him, and I thought he had a pretty good shift for a first game and a tough team and a tough moment. So, but back to your comments. If we're going to play the identity and style that we have, it feels like Momo's right, just because we need Bongi in that back five, being tough and locked down defensively. I do say, ironically, I have over the years liked Robin only when it's a back four and we have higher wingers. I think he's better at bringing players into the game. To your point, whether it's a false nine or he's kind of more of a hold up, he's not going to really get in behind. So I think there's some options, but it feels like whether we go to back four, it doesn't seem like we've done that a lot this year. So then it really comes down, if we put Bungie up top, who's going to be that right wing back? Kind of in there. Is it Julian? Is it DJ?
Another guy who's a little bit hurt right now.
Yeah, which you saw in I think the second team game. So long story short, we are banged up a little bit, but we do have options. Like I said, the nice thing is like every team goes through moments where they either get injuries or a situation like Tani happened. This is what building a group for the playoff run is about. Ultimately it's about getting ready for that, what you're going to do. And I think Momo showed some mobility that I think under our current identity we've been most of the year. It feels like it should be hopefully a good replacement for Kelvin until he gets back.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting time for him to see how. I mean, if he's the guy who gets the starts up there, that's a quick rise to starting for an MLS playoff team that's fighting for the top of the West coming from a USL Championship side just a couple months ago for a young 21-year-old, and that's fun to see those kind of leaps and developments, and we'll certainly see that over the next couple months. Any final thoughts from you guys from the Chicago match before we look ahead to Colorado at the weekend? John, Manny?
I gotta say, I obviously haven't talked to him. It must be a really strange time for Tani Oluwaseyi right now, because on the one hand, he scored a goal at Sevilla the other day. What an amazing career this guy is having. Yeah. On the other hand, I just can't imagine being him right now and following Minnesota, and Yeboah got hurt, and this is a time when your old team and all of your buddies desperately need you, and now you're gone off having a great time, and boy, this lineup would sure look better with Oluwaseyi in it right now. So I'm looking at it from his perspective. Obviously, I haven't talked to him, Manny. I don't know if you've talked to him either, but it must be, from a personal level, it must be very difficult to be Tani Oluwaseyi right now.
Oh, I mean, he's such a great kid. It probably is. But I do want to remind our audience, like, the reality of all this is Tani could have gotten injured and not be with us the rest of the year. Tani could have dropped his level and not played well and not played the rest of the year. I really think there's a scenario where things happen and you have to move on, and our groups have to figure out how to do well. And it's really looking back at maybe what could have been is good for maybe learning for something in the future, but it's not where we are. And where we are right now is Kelvin got injured afterwards, which you can't control. He hopefully is going to work his butt off to be ready for the playoff run. We got a young kid that I'm excited to see the next couple games, guys. I mean, this is, to your point, you've got a 21-year-old that has a chance to help this group build in momentum into the playoffs. How fun is that? I mean, at least it's not building momentum to try to make the playoffs. I mean, I really want to. It's so we still haven't watched. I think we lost 2 games in a row in the MLS this year. Knock on wood.
Nope, still haven't.
Think so? No,
still hasn't happened.
Again, I just. My brain needs to kind of keep reminding ourselves how good of a year we're having, how good these guys on the field have dealt with adversity all year. Every time. Every moment this year so far where we've kind of said, bad runs happening. Nope. They shut it down and we pushed to the top of the West.
Yeah, no.
Colorado is really not the place you want to go when you need a, steady, strong result. It's a chaos factory.
Do you feel a brawl happening? Is this brawl territory?
I mean, it does. You're right. That seems likely.
This is the most drama-filled team we play usually, right? I mean,
it's between this and Portland.
It helps that Nico Romero is already suspended, sure, right? And so he can't get himself sent off.
This has got to have more red cards than the Portland series, I'm guessing.
I would imagine so. I don't know the exact numbers on that, but yeah, this one, these two teams tend to not like each other when they get on the field. So let's set up this match. Minnesota coming in on the road, 8 matches unbeaten on the road in MLS play. So it's been a while. It's back to that Houston game that we referenced early on. Last time they lost on the road in league play. It's been a while. What's up?
I said, really? That was like April, May, something like that. When was that?
It was a long time ago. It was May 14th. It was the last time
we were all
lost
so
on
much
the road.
younger then.
Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
As for Colorado, they've been over the last 5 games in league play exceptional at home. 4 wins, 1 loss over the last 5. 8 wins, 2 draws, 5 losses at home this season. This is a Rapid side, just like Chicago, fighting for their playoff lives right now. They sit just 3 points above Houston for the final playoffs, or for in that play-in game. Dallas is below them by 2 points in 9th place. So there's still a little bit of cushion for them in the race for the final playoff spots in the Western Conference. But this is a team like Chicago that their defense isn't that great. They've allowed 52 goals, which is the most of any playoff team or team currently sitting in the playoffs in the Western Conference, only behind Chicago in that department across the entire league. So defensively, they can be got at. This is going to be an interesting one for Minnesota on Saturday, Manny.
Yeah, it is. My brain goes to the transfer window in Paxton Aronson, because really it feels like the identity of Chicago or Colorado for the last year is kind of collecting American players that have done well in the league and gone overseas and haven't done well, and kind of bring them back and build the team around it. And, you mentioned, I think they've lost 3 of their last 5. So they've had, given up some decent amount of goals. So it's a big game for them in their own way, because I don't know if they've really found their identity since they signed him, which is a great opportunity for us ultimately to really hopefully push our identity on them, which I think they're a little bit unsure how they're playing and getting results.
John, what's your expectations coming into this one? What are the things you're keeping your eye out on for this match coming up on Saturday night?
Well, we already touched on who's going to play up front for Minnesota. I think that's probably the biggest story going on. Colorado is I like the Aronson signing in the transfer window just because it proved that the Rapids owners remembered they had a team in America. You know what I mean? Every year their owners signed 59 players for Arsenal, and then you look at the Rapids roster and you go, do they know that they have 5 senior roster spots open and they don't have any designated players or under 20? Like, how is this possible? Do they remember where this team plays? They know it exists, right? Like, have they been joining the owner calls? Like, there's meetings and stuff. Do they send anyone to those? That's how the Rapids usually feel. So it's just nice to know that somebody's paying attention in Colorado.
How have things changed, Manny, since they sold Mihailovic to Toronto and brought in, as you said, Aronson? How has that changed the way they set up and how they play going forward? Because obviously, before Mihailovic left, he was their leading goal contributor, 9 goals, 6 assists. Navarro has taken that over, 12 goals, 3 assists on the season. So it's certainly changed who they go through in the attack and where they pinpoint. But how has that changed, and how do the Loons set up against Colorado on Saturday?
Oh, yeah. I think we don't think about them too much and make sure we get back to what we do really well, which is, to me, my viewpoint, we're organized and structured defensively. We are really tough to break down. We have that box midfield that we just dominate, and then we find ways to go in transition. I still think we can evolve to even more keep possession, particularly when you're at altitude and you get a lead. You can really move that ball around and hurt a team that's trying to get back into the game. I think for me, and again, I haven't watched him, full disclosure, as much since Paxton came. My brain is trying to think about how he and Cole Bassett, who I think are a little bit similar in terms of athleticism and qualities, essentially, fit. I think Mihailovic, I understand deciding to let him go and because he's an amazing player, but they're like, you know what, we want to change it up. We're not going to build things around one player. But I'm still intrigued. Like I said, it was an interesting signing, and again, I think a lot of people were excited about it. But I'm still curious to see how it fits with what Colorado's trying to do.
Yeah, it'll be. I'm intrigued as to how this offense looks going forward and how the Loons respond after a difficult week last week, and kind of look to get revenge after the 2-1 loss to Colorado at Allianz Field earlier this season. John, as we look at this game and as we look at the week they just came off of, how important do you feel that the rest is this week compared to what they had to go through last week? Now that they've had a full week of rest, time to rehabilitate after a very taxing week last week.
Well, it's huge. Manny, you mentioned the red zone before in terms of looking at the numbers and going, all right, these guys are in. Yep. How long does it take to get out of the red zone?
It's really
about 7 hours of football.
It's usually,
used to be commercial free, no longer.
It's closer to it's 4 to 5 days, closer to 5. Essentially, it's about your muscles tearing when you play. Essentially, every time you play, your muscles just tear a little bit, and you need that time to recover and have them there. So, long story short, usually to be fine, it's about good, safe is 5 days, but essentially 4-ish you could do as well, and say, you know what, you're out of that. And it depends on how you train that week too, how much rest versus how hard you train. But ultimately, we have a full week now, so we should have everybody ready to go no matter what.
And pushing forward over the next couple of weeks, like Jonathan said, there's 3 games over the next 4 weeks, so it's not like anybody is going to be particularly taxed going into playoff time. And then even looking at the playoffs, it was funny when we were talking to Ramsey about injuries and stuff, and he said, well, Yeboah and Carlos Harvey are going to be out for the rest of the regular season, but they could return during the playoffs. And just sort of looking at the calendar with that international break and with a 3-game first-round playoff series, like if Minnesota, in terms of Carlos Harvey returning, he had surgery on his meniscus, so most of the time you look at that and go, well, I don't know about that. But if Minnesota could get through a first-round playoff series, that conference semifinal is not until the week before Thanksgiving. And just looking outside, it's 82 degrees or whatever. That's a long time. But in terms of getting these guys back playoff time, there's a long time before you really get down to the meat of the playoffs of past that first round series. So there's a lot of recovery time this fall. Let's put it that way.
And if things go right, I'm just kind of playing this out of my head. If things go right and you get to that conference semifinals, that's only 5 games between now and before the week before Thanksgiving. That's just not a whole lot of game time. And going back to the discussion of getting some of these guys that you brought in at the end of the transfer window fit, adding that onto this conversation, how do you do that with so little games? That's going to be difficult as well, Manny.
Oh, yeah. No, listen, I think there's we're talking about the players. There's every opportunity to get guys healthy because of the international breaks that come September, October, November. And it's such a hard playoff story to tell, both for the players being sharp, and frankly, we bring this up for our fans. I like how John brought it up. I think our fans have to prepare for, if it goes away for 2 weeks in October, November, that doesn't mean soccer's over, guys. Keep watching, keep waiting. It'll come back. It always feels like the longest playoffs in the history of sports because of those breaks. But long story short, it does allow guys to come back. I mean, we bring up Hassani Dotson. He's still fighting to get back and healthy. There's a lot of elements here and players that have a potential. We talked about our new guys getting fitter and stronger and really having an extra month essentially based on the timing of the playoffs to be available.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch this play out.
And then a week after the season's over, preseason for next year starts. So there's no sense in turning off everybody. Just get ready.
As long as you make the playoffs, that off season's very quick and the turnaround's not that long. But if you miss the playoffs,
from a player's perspective, we talk all the time about flipping the seasons and this would be terrible, blah, blah, blah. If you're a player, you'd be like, what difference do I have? As long as I still get the week at Christmas off, my schedule is the same. It doesn't make a bit of difference between my work schedule.
All guys currently get 6 weeks off after the season. So no matter what. So if even December 9th ends, they got 6 weeks into January off. The guys who, if they end a little bit earlier, we can keep them a little bit. We can have them come in a little bit, not early, but we can have them stay a little bit longer. But every team's got to decide how to do that. It's funny because it used to be more time off. The guys are flipping now because they're understanding, and we kind of mentioned, John, you mentioned red zone. They know now being in and around the club longer, even in the offseason, helps them not dip below, essentially into the red zone to get back.
Right.
So they actually now don't like being off as much because they want to make sure they keep their level of fitness high. So it's an interesting kind of shift now where individual players are taking care of their bodies better in all sports than I've ever seen.
It was funny after last season, again, to go back to Will Trapp, I remember asking him, well, how much time do you take off between the end of this season and getting ready for next season? And Will Trapp might be different than everybody else. And I thought he was going to say we're going on vacation for a month and we're going to be in Orlando and I'm just going to sit there with a margarita in my hand. He said, it's about 7 to 10 days I'll take off and then start getting ready. I was like, that's your off season? A week and a half is your off season? That's ridiculous.
That's his livelihood, man, and he's good at it. Like I said.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's wrong, and I'm not saying everybody shouldn't do that, but it was just one of those moments where it was like, well, I guess that doesn't sound fun for you, but I guess you kick a ball for a living, so that's good. So
Yep,
I don't know whether to feel bad for you or not now.
Back to this weekend, though. Yeah. It's a huge rebound one. I want to ask you guys this one question. Putting pressure on us, I don't think we've been swept by any team this year.
LAFC. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
They beat us at home?
Yeah.
Yep.
Shoot. 1-0?
Yeah, it was 1-0 both games, yeah.
All right. Never mind.
Well, go ahead. Go ask the question.
No, I mean, we can't get swept this weekend. So we still can't.
You sort of look at the potential playoff opponents for Minnesota, and you've got Portland. Loons haven't beaten Portland. You got Colorado. If they don't win this weekend, the Loons won't have beaten Colorado. Austin, they beat Austin on the road and then have lost the last two.
Bring on Austin. Seattle, John. Bring on
exactly.
Seattle.
That was the point.
Who says that going into the playoffs?
Honestly, the one team that Minnesota could play in the playoffs that they've had some success against this year is the Seattle Sounders. I don't even want to say it out loud.
In the history of Major League Soccer has ever said bring on Seattle, other than maybe Portland because of the rivalry factor.
Yeah. Portland just, they just want to bring a machete to a soccer game and just fight it out there. But it's strange to say, but in terms of the teams that Minnesota seems most likely to end up playing in the playoffs, Seattle is the one they've had some success against this year.
Yeah, and you look at the standings for the rest of the season. Was it 7 points separating first through fourth? Minnesota above LAFC by just 4 points. LAFC have 2 games in hand, so they could surpass Minnesota if they win both those games. And it feels like with how LAFC are playing, that's certainly within reason to talk about that. And so it's this race down the final stretch of the season is going to be very tight. There's going to be a lot of games, not just Minnesota United games, but elsewhere across the Western Conference that we'll have to keep our eye on. Guys, one last question for you. I'm going to get you to make a prediction here, Manny. Your predictions for this weekend. John, I'll start with you.
So last year's game in Colorado was one of the strangest Minnesota United games I can ever remember. Minnesota was winning 3-1 at halftime. And if I remember correctly, this number might be off, but it's not off by far. They completed 61 passes in the entire first half or something like that. Yeah. They basically didn't have the ball except for the moments where Sang-Bin Jong was putting it into the net. It was one of the oddest, most chaotic games I've ever seen. Colorado came back and tied it 3-3. Manny already suggested that there's probably going to be a fight. So I think I think it'll be chaos. I think 2-2 or 3-3 again seems like the way this one's going to go. And
does each side end with 11 guys on the field?
No, nobody ends with 11 guys on the field. And one of the teams doesn't end with 10. Well, I say that, but I already said Nico Romero's not playing in this game. He's suspended. So that drops the chaos from like here to here.
Manny, scoreline prediction and whether each side ends with all 11 players on the field.
I'm not going to do a prediction that way, but I will say this. I think we've shown that we bounce back really well and from a loss in the league play. So I feel good about where the guys are going to be coming into this one. I don't think it's going to be easy. I do think there's goals in the game, so I don't think it's a traditional road game where it's like a 1-0. I think we're going to have to maybe, try to come back down or tied to win the game.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one for sure.
Jonathan, who is the Colorado player most likely to punch Michael Boxall in the face?
Oh, I don't know their. 1 second. Let me pull up the roster. That's a tough one.
Navarro, isn't it?
It's got to be Navarro, right?
I think the odds would be the lowest on Navarro.
The lowest?
Well, the highest, the lowest, the most likely.
Yeah, most likely because he's right there battling with him, minute in and minute out, and I would say Navarro probably the likeliest candidate. I don't see that in Paxton Aronson's game, so, but we'll see. Should be a fun one. 8:30 p.m. kickoff for that one. 8 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terrar and myself on 1500 ESPN, the Score North mobile app, and live.1500ESPN.com. You can watch that on an MLS season pass. Looking forward to it, guys. This should be a fun one. We'll talk to you next week and review that game and preview what's coming up for Minnesota United. Looking forward to it. Thanks to production staff, Grace Dearson, Kyle Hayward, Evan Antler for putting this on every week. And Loons fans, we'll talk to you next week.